Hello and welcome to Cannabis Marketing Live, all puff, no fluff. I'm your host, Kendra Losi, and today we are talking with Carlos Perez, and we are going to be talking about branding insights from a cannabis industry expert. Now, I can't tell you how many times clients come to me and ask they want new branding, but they're not sure what exactly branding is, or they have an idea and they have a name, but they need a logo and they're considering that branding. But today we're going to be talking about all the things that go into creating a brand, a creative team, as well as the importance of staying out of your comfort zone. And so I can't wait to have our guests join us today. So with us today, let me do the intro. Time for the intro. With us today is Carlos Perez, and Carlos is the Chief Design Officer at Cannecht, which we'll be talking about that a little bit as well, because it's a cool new outfit that you are going to want to know how to use and be a part of. Carlos has been building brands for over 30 years, and he is exceptionally skilled designer, specializing in directing creative teams and brand initiatives for dozens of CPG products. He's worked on campaigns like Fossil Watches and LucasArts early in his career, and he's spent more than a decade working in prominent craft beer and cannabis brands. So we are excited to have him here today. Welcome, Carlos. How are you doing?
Hey, Kendra. Good. Thanks for having me. Like the intro.
Of course. Of course. Thanks for being here.
Yeah,
we are excited that you're here. Those of you watching, if you have any questions for Carlos or any comments, be sure to put your comments in the chat. We are pulling in comments. We're streaming live currently on LinkedIn and YouTube, which is a little bit of a different change from streaming on Facebook. I'm very excited to be on LinkedIn now. Carlos, can you tell us, before we get started talking about creative, can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in the cannabis industry?
Yeah, I'd love to. Industry, I started back in 2014, but before that, it was kind of something I've always kind of been attracted to, even from my college days into one of my very first positions as a creative. One of the things I did besides, show my portfolio was the initiation was, taking a hit out of a bong. So that was kind of fun. But most recently, 2014, I started with a company called Lunchbox Alchemy here in Oregon. I've always been kind of attracted towards what I call vice brands, craft cannabis, craft beer, craft spirits. And there was a really good opportunity in 2014 to jump into that craft cannabis market with a small group of individuals who were extractors, entrepreneurs, and people who love to build brands like myself. So it's been a wild ride since then. The industry's just, I love it. It's a lot of cool people. And there's still some really good opportunities out there for sure.
Absolutely. What do you think? And so I love asking people this question. What are you most proud of in terms of the work that you've done in the cannabis industry?
I'd have to say CPG at the moment. I love doing design work, specifically for packaging. That's my core background is design. I went to School of Visual Arts at Pennsylvania State University under some great professors, and I learned a lot about packaging. And I've, through the course of my career, I've, done advertising, packaging, some marketing as well. But what I love the most is actually having a product in hand, seeing it on the shelf, seeing people's reaction to it, and being able to actually have something tangible. So I'm pretty stoked on some accomplishments in that arena, but that's my favorite part for sure.
There's always something about seeing something that that started with like just a thought and an idea, and then seeing it out in the wild.
Yeah,
I've felt that way about billboards and other things that I've helped place, right? Like I've never been on the creative side, but I'm like, I put that there.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, it goes beyond packaging as well. I mean, when you're developing apps, you can see people use your product. You can see how people interact with it. There's so many different analytical tools out there now that give you that touch point that you would typically get when you go into a store and do kind of some sort of secret Santa, or you would lurk and you see, oh, look, okay, let's see how they interact with the product. With the digital side, you can do that, but it's kind of more, on the computer, and you're seeing how people react to it. So definitely the interaction is the key part for me.
Absolutely. So one of the questions that I have for you is when we look at the cannabis industry as a whole, right? You're in Oregon, I'm in California.
Yeah.
There's, in theory, things should look and feel differently. When you look at the cannabis industry as a whole, what are the things that you think that, like the traps people fall into when creating a brand?
That's a great one because we fell into one when we were entering California. So cannabis brand we had in Oregon had really great audience. We started from the medical days. We were able to capitalize on a great product, a great vibe with our consumers. We had a great sales team. Obviously, we marketed the product in all sorts of different ways, guerrilla style, traditional media, online media. To the extent that we could, because there was a lot of regulation that kicked in. And so we had a really good Oregon vibe. And going into California, it's a whole different market. And I think that's one thing that was a learning experience for myself, was that California is its own market. It's a great market. It has its own feel. And the same thing with Oregon, same thing with Colorado and Washington. It's not like a national holistic CPG brand where you can market the product a certain way and everyone's going to adopt. There's different regulations that come into play, but there's also different ways that people perceive the brand based off of where it's cultivated. We have the Oregon, Southern Oregon, weed, which is amazing. Then you have Humboldt County, California, different areas of Southern California, San Diego. So it all depends on doing the research and making sure that you're very familiar with the market before you enter it. So you're on the road to success.
I think that's a really great way to describe it. One of the things that I ran into is that whenever someone's like, I really want to create a cannabis brand and I have this unique design, I want to make my brand stand out. I want it to be green. I want it to include the leaves, and I want to have cannecht in the name.
Right.
Like, I think that's always a little tricky.
Oh yeah, I've been there. One of the reasons why they approached me, the partners from the company that I helped kind of brand Lunchbox, it was my experience in cannabis was limited at that point. I was just kind of a fun thing to do at the time. It helped me. I approached it in a way where I wasn't really held back by, proprietors that were like, you have to have, a marijuana leaf in there. It's got to be reggae style. So it was kind of carte blanche. Back in the days when I was doing some apps too, it's, one of the questions we would ask people would be like, do you really need an app? When I was having my consulting practice, it was, oh, we need an app. And you would actually have to run through a series and say, okay, let's talk these people out of an app because they may not know what it is, but it's a hot thing to have. And the same thing with cannabis. When, I would have clients come to me, potential clients, they're like, yeah, we have this great idea. We want to do an edible. We want to, show the cannabis leaf and it needs to be green. And I was like, let's reassess that because the market is really saturated with those types of elements. What can we do that's going to disrupt it? What can we do that's going to be a little bit different? Because there's other companies out there that may be doing the same thing. So anything we can do to stand out a little bit is going to help in cannabis market, any market really, but specifically in cannabis, I've noticed that's where it makes a difference.
I totally agree. I think once you start to look at it from what can stand out, and there's like, you can have all those elements and they can work really well, but there's a time and place too, right? Like depends on what products you're creating, how you need to stand out on the shelves, and what are the elements that you want to include, but also what your brand stands for.
Yeah, that was a big hurdle for me. You mentioned standing out on the shelves because that was, my background was, okay, let's put a product that's going to stand out on the shelves. So going into this, I had that mindset, but I quickly learned there's no such thing as being able to put your product on a shelf for people to just walk up and grab and say, oh yeah, I'm gonna check this out. It's very controlled, and that's the thing with the licensed market, even more so than liquor. Where you can go into a liquor store here in Oregon, that's what we have, and you can browse the shelves freely, walk around, pick up bottles, look at the labels, really interact with the product. But when it comes into play with cannabis, specifically in Oregon and even in California, you don't have that ability. You don't have the ability for consumers to walk up there and pick your product up. You're really depending on the branding that you've put forward, online through brand ambassadors, through educational programs that you can put together with, intake buyers, bud tenders. So it's definitely a different experience. So it's, as a brand, you want to be able to do everything you can to make sure that the consumer does have that feel. Even so with a digital product too.
It's really true. There's very few dispensaries in California that I've gone in and been able to touch and hold the products. And a lot of times it's just the packaging.
Yep.
And then, you're like touching, holding empty packaging, and then you can go back. But otherwise, it's behind the shelves.
Yeah, there's been some pretty cool innovations with flower. You can actually go into some dispensaries and there's like a glass with where you can turn it and smell the flower and go, okay, yeah, I get this. Because that's a huge part of the experience, right? It's not like it's wrapped in cellophane and
packaged between 10 layers of plastic.
It's not a piece of meat or a tomato. It's it's different.
So one of the things that I think is really important when you're looking at creating creative teams and really what goes into branding, I want to step back for a minute, and can you talk a little bit about what goes into branding, and then just the different pieces and skills that requires? Because a lot of people tend to think it's like one thing. It's a logo.
Yeah, initially, yeah, exactly. And, I was in that camp a long, long, long time ago. I was like, brand, oh, that's a logo. That's an identity. But that's not the case at all. That's just one part of it. And one thing I've always told people is, the brand holistically is just, think of it as a touch point, right? Think of all the different touch points that you have with consumers or other businesses if it's B2B. Customer service, your identity, your marketing, your advertising, when you pick up the phone and talk to somebody. If it's a CPG, it's how the product feels. It's all these different elements that make up the brand. Initially, like you said, it's like, hey, is it a logo? I'm looking for a brand. That's a great start. But holistically, it's really about all those different things that I mentioned that make up the brand. And then when it comes to putting those pieces together, that's where you really start working on a strategy, is how to, okay, we have this thing. How do we get it out into the marketplace? How do we make sure people are aware of it? Is it something new that there's another component that we have to educate people with? Because that's, a lot of things with businesses who want to build a brand. It's a little bit of a different step if you have a product, whether it's digital or actually a physical product that people are familiar with. Like if you're going to develop a new pair of headphones, people already know what those do. But if you're going to develop something that's completely unique to the marketplace, you're going to disrupt the marketplace. There's way more steps that are involved because you have to take people's perceptions of what they think is the correct way to do it and convince them that, no, there's actually a better way. So there's a little bit more work to do with, emerging brands that are disruptive in the marketplace versus ones that are situated. There's a lot of churn I've seen in the retail space where there's all these different companies. And I see it a lot on Instagram because, you go through there and you're this, I think it's every 4 or 5 ads or every 5 posts is an ad. And there's these different companies that are selling pretty much a product that's been around for a while. For some reason, I get a lot of ads for bed frames or bed mattresses. I don't know why. Maybe because I'm on my phone late or something. And it's like a dozen different types of companies that are just selling a mattress, and it's how they sell it. But that's more sales versus branding. But yeah, I do believe that there's different ways to brand products strategically, depending on what the market is and if you have a new product or not.
Absolutely. I think it's really interesting when you start to look at the different ways to brand something. And to your point, what's the psychology behind not just creating a brand, but what's the psychology behind getting people to make different decisions from what they've already made?
Yeah, you got to hit them when, there's a pain point in effect, right? And typically people don't look for something that they're not really interested in unless they have a pain point that it needs to be addressed. And if you're a brand and you happen to hit that at the right time, then it's golden, right? There's all these different ways that we can market products and pitch them to potential users or consumers. But if the consumer or user isn't feeling that pain point at the moment, it's not going to be effective. So, being able to launch a successful brand is, more than just putting all the pieces together. The market has to be there. The market has to be ready. And we have to be able to strike at the right time in order to, be that unicorn.
Absolutely. And I think that it's always so interesting to me. I had a client when I used to work in an agency, at a tuna fish client that was down in San Diego, Bumblebee Tuna. And, talk about a commodity brand.
Oh, yeah.
And they were trying to break into like the millennial market and fast protein, like healthy protein. But the reality was that most people who buy tuna fish buy the brand their parents bought, buy the brands their mom bought. And the same was toothpaste and a couple other like true commodity brands. So when you look at something like cannabis, which everyone's saying is starting to become more, CBD and cannabis becoming more like that commodity type product in certain states, let's be clear. What does that look like? Because you're going to start buying, there is no brand my parents used to buy. So now you have a new behavior of going in and buying something in a dispensary. You have all these brands vying for that attention and that loyalty.
Yep.
So what tips do you have for brands that are looking to be able to stand out, that are looking to be able to become that tried and true brand, aside the quality of the product? We all know that's a factor for sure.
Yeah. So it all depends on what consumer you're going to go after and truly what you believe as a brand that you're putting forth to the public. I've always worked, I should say, in cannabis. I've always worked with brands that I've met the grower, I know the extractor, or I know the team, I know the blood, sweat, and tears that's gone into it. So I'm very, at this point, I'm very choosy or picky as to like the types of brands I want to work with when it comes to my consulting. So what I do stress is if you're emerging and you're getting into the marketplace, stick to something that is going to be unique, possibly even something that's new. And I know that's not necessarily anything fresh in the marketplace when it comes to like, larger brands that are out there. But, it is more than just a plant. There are more things that you can do with it. There's different types of edible products you can come out with. There's a bunch of edible products in the market today, but I've noticed that some of them are doing some really cool stuff with strain specific, flavor specific. Even the shape of the product is pretty cool. It is. And, you have to decide as a brand, it's like, who are we going to go after? Target your consumer, find out if there's a hole in the marketplace, and then really go for it and nail it and own it and do something that's, you're going to make your team stoked, but more importantly, make the consumer stoked and give them an option to something that's not there yet. Because it emerges, I think the way we see edibles now is going to be different in a few years. Edibles are edibles for sure, but there's a big gap in the marketplace when it comes to, let me say, when you go to the grocery store, right, you can make a choice as a consumer whether you want to go with a brand that's been out there, like you said, like maybe your parents, like Bumblebee Tuna Fish or whatever. But you can also, go to different markets and pick tuna fish, for example, that comes in like a glass jar that is, caught on the line and, from this fisherman in Alaska who's been doing it, so you're going to most likely pay a little bit more for that. And it's going to be a little bit harder to seek out, but it's out there. And the more that consumers can support brands like that, I think there's going to be a good balance of these larger MSOs who are out there that, they're out there and they're in different states and, they're providing a service, they're providing a product that people can rely on. Nothing wrong with that. But there's also craft brands that are out there that may not have the resources to get to, all the different touch points and states that they want to. And that's totally fine too. So, yeah, I mean, if you have the ability to stay focused on a product that you believe in and you know that there's a spot for it, go for it, and the consumers will find it.
It's absolutely true. I was just pulling up the LinkedIn because I can only see comments from people coming from YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just pulling up LinkedIn to see if there was any comments coming in from over there. If there's a few people watching, but no comments over there. So I think that when you start looking at exactly what you were saying is finding those niches. I'm sorry, I started laughing when you said different shapes because I was thinking of the Mike Tyson's ear animal.
By the way, I love that. You know, I think I tweeted it out, or I was on Instagram or something, and it came through. I get all these notifications whenever something cannabis comes up, and you know, kudos to the team that did that. I think it's brilliant. You know, it's funny, it's hilarious, it's a huge brand. Tyson, of course, or I think Tyson 2.0 is the right name. I just thought it was funny, and it's like that is gonna evoke a reaction with the audience. People are gonna go out and buy that, right? However, it's up to the team and it's up to the product for them to go buy that again.
Right.
And so that's where branding really comes in. It's like, okay, great. Is this a novelty item? Is this a one-time purchase? How are you going to build the brand around that? What's the next punch after the edible, right? What, you know,
literally.
Yeah. Is the next one going to be a mitt? Or, you know, I don't know. But the ear was with the bite.
Heavyweight belt.
That was a good one.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to me. One of the things, and it's part of the same conversation that we're having, is one of the things we wanted to touch on is the importance of staying out of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of what you've been talking about today is because it requires people and all of us to think outside what we see, what we're used to. How does that help when it comes to branding?
It helps a lot. So when you're building a brand, and you know, one of the reasons I touched on earlier is why they approached me was I wasn't familiar with cannabis branding when I first started, because there wasn't cannabis branding. It was just medicinal. So I was definitely out of my comfort zone approaching the marketplace, and there was a couple of missteps, but I got over it. So, you know, if you go into something and you're really comfortable, you're not going to be excited. You're not going to be stimulated. So why not go for it? Currently, right now, you know, as my position in Cannecht, I'm, you know, part of a startup team. So it's always something that we're doing something different. It's always out of our comfort zone, and that's great because it keeps us on our toes. And you know, I've done startups for the past 20 years, and it's great. It's exciting. It's scary, thrilling. All those different things have taken me out of my comfort zone and allowed me to enabled me to work in these different mindsets of, hey, I'm going to focus on branding, sure, but within those different, you know, segments of branding, I'm going to dive into marketing. I'm going to dive into advertising. I'm going to dive into social media. So, you know, being able to go in there and learn about the product, and then sort of peel back and then build a team around that knows those specific lanes. Like, let's build a team and let them focus on that. Not so I can get back in my comfort zone at all, but so they can do it correctly. You know, learn about it and then bring people on board that really know about it, and then watch them grow.
It's always been the challenge, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean this to sound this way, but I remember back in the day, I was teaching social media at a university,
Mm-hmm.
but I needed someone to do the day-to-day pieces of it, right? Like that wasn't my job. I already had a job. And so it was one of those where, like, my goal is to find someone who's smarter than this, like smarter than me at this. I need them to be smarter than me because I know it up here. But at the time, I hadn't been implementing it. Or if I had, it was just very, like, when I had time, it was second or third job at that point.
Yeah.
So trying to find someone, and it shouldn't be that hard. And it's not as hard now as it used to be. But it's one of those things where it's like, hire the experts because you know that they know what they're doing. Yeah. But you also have to trust them once you hire them, right?
Yeah. So that's a big part of it. You know, building a team, it's like, when I'm doing that, And when I'm looking for somebody or someone who is an expert, or so they say, professional, whatever, that's great. But what I'm looking for is somebody who can work in a team setting, somebody who is able to communicate, somebody who's able to use their profession, but also be able to work together so we don't run into any type of conflict. Now, for me, having a design firm, and I would always look for people's portfolio and be able to see their work and their talent. But more oftentimes than not, I went with people who I just vibed with. They were just good people, and they were trainable in a sense where they were open to learn, open to basically go outside of their comfort level without any sort of attitude. So yeah, it's pretty cool to actually work with people like that and build teams.
It's amazing how hard that can be to find sometimes.
It is. It is. Especially now, and since we're mostly all virtual, it's like you very rarely get a chance to meet someone face to face. And like, this is great, by the way, but meeting someone and like having that conversation, I do miss that. To a certain extent.
There's an energy that comes, I don't know about you, but I'm such a whiteboard person. There's an energy that comes like, you can just map it out like this.
Yeah. I mean,
like,
there's tons of tools out there that you can do it virtually. But I do miss that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I've used the virtual ones. I like them, but it's still, there's something about like, oh, I've got an idea. Let's jump up and throw it against the wall and see how it looks and see how it works and that kind of thing. One of the things that I really want to touch on as well is what you're doing. You mentioned Cannecht. I think that it's really important. Can you tell us a little bit about Cannecht? And while Carlos is talking, I'm also going to put some of the information down below of how to reach out and how to connect with Carlos too.
Yeah, so Cannecht started about just over a year ago. I jumped on board in August with a friend of mine, the founder, Pete Crawford, really good guy, had this idea. We met back in 2014 because we were having kind of the same issues when it came to finding the right service providers. I was on the operator side. I was in charge of purchasing product, working with the right marketing team, getting PR, basically making a lot of connections. And when we first started, there was a lot of people that wanted to get into the cannabis industry, service providers, I should say, that weren't necessarily familiar with regulations, but they weren't familiar with the process. So there was a lot of hurdles that we had to jump through. Fast forward, we're still finding that that's an issue. So what Cannecht does is it allows people, service providers and operators, to create this marketplace once they jump onto the platform. So as a service provider, I can go in, log in, create an account, and just once I can create a service listing. Then I can create another one and another. And so basically, instead of having to cold call and get leads and go over the same questions again and again and again with a prospective partner, I do it once, I put it on the marketplace, and I quickly get deals done. The operator comes in and they do the same thing. They put in what project they're looking for. They enter the parameters, and the parameters are really based off of some basic and very informational things, like you can do location, you can do pricing, you can do time, scheduling. It all depends on what you're going after. And if there's a match, you basically get a deal done. We provide a contract for you, and you're off and running. You meet the service provider, and you're on down the road. So it's really trying to quickly wrap that process down versus having to go to numerous trade shows, make numerous cold calls. You're hitting somebody at the right time when they're looking for something. So it's a pretty cool platform. We're in beta right now, actually, and we're looking for service providers to get on board.
Absolutely. And who hasn't, as a service provider, I've been on both sides as well, who hasn't struggled with all of the different conferences that you're going to try and meet people, and the virtual networking over the last few years, which has been awesome. I'm not knocking it. but it's exhausting after a while, like trying to find and source new leads. And if I get one more cold email from LinkedIn, not that I don't love LinkedIn, but if I get one more cold email from someone who's totally unrelated to what I do, or like, hey, we can help you with your marketing services. Like, did you
Yeah,
not read?
I get a lot of those, and it's that's for me that's the pain point, right? And
Right.
unfortunately, we can't turn those off because people are going to consistently, as long as they have our emails, we're going to constantly get those. But what this is trying to alleviate are those people like, hey, stop spamming people, come onto our platform, put down exactly what you're offering, and do multiple listings, and then let us do the work for you. Let us make the match for you. And then you can move on down. And the cool thing is you can have a service listing on there, and you can use it. And if it doesn't work, the magic behind our system is we can give you the analytics and we can tell you why it's not working or why it is working. So right now, Web 2 is all about gathering data. And, when it comes to Facebook, Instagram, we're the product, but we're kind of flipping that around, and we're giving people the ability to look at their data and say, okay, look, you made a deal here because of these parameters, and you didn't make a deal here because of these parameters. Let's fine tune that for you so you can be more successful and get more deals done. So it's a pretty cool platform. There's a lot of logic that's going in behind the scenes to make these matches happen. So we're pretty stoked. We're actually, I know this is going to be recorded, but we're having a kind of a beta launch party tonight to celebrate.
It's exciting. I think that anytime, because this is completely changing how sales is traditionally done for B2B. And so anytime, especially services, so anytime that you do something new, like we were saying earlier with your brand, you're changing the way people have done things for a long time. And so it's an exciting disruption for sure.
It totally is. Right now, the marketplace is just saturated with directories. I don't want to say the status quo, but what people, service providers are so used to doing is getting their services listed on directory after directory after directory. And that's, there's two ways, right? That's like casting a wide net and hoping that you're going to catch something. And what we're trying to do is like, let people know there's a better way to do that. Just, list it once and get multiple results and to a targeted market.
Okay, I know I just had the screen on here before, but as we're wrapping up, there's two things I want to do first. One, I have two questions for you for a speed round. It's a really quick speed round because once again, there's only two questions. Okay. So the first is, what is your favorite cannabis product right now?
Edible product by Wild in Oregon.
Oh, they're good.
They're so good.
Those are really good. They're really good. I like their sleep ones. The last two times I've gone to a dispensary, they were out. And I'm like, what do you mean it's out?
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
So, here's the question for you. What do you do in that situation? Do you buy another edible? Mm-hmm. You do. See, consumers, they're fickle. I get it. It's hard, Well,
see, and I'm also in that specific situation, I'm taking it for sleep. Right? Like, not that cannabis directly relates in sleep, but I'm not making a health claim, but I have really bad insomnia. So sometimes it'll be like 4 or 5 a.m. and I'm trying to fall asleep.
Yeah.
So like Wild, I love. There's a couple other products that I love. So if that sleep one's not there, then I'll look at like Plus gummies or some of the other options that are available here in California, because I know what's going to help me. And, I've tested a lot of different ones, and Wild's always like reliable.
Yeah, that's true. And that's very important. Reliability.
But if I'm looking for something for fun, it's going to be a little bit different answer,
or just have like 5 Wilds.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. What brand? Okay, so my second question, what brand do you admire in the cannabis space? What, like, from their look and feel and what they're doing?
That's a good one. There's a few. So I don't want to say, I'll say it, Dosist. So I love Dosist because, from a brand perspective, it's super clean. It's
Mhm.
super informative. It's super educational. They're like crossing off all the boxes. And it's really great because the market that they're trying to hit, I think, are not only people that are situated in the marketplace, but they're really out there trying to grab the people that are trying to get into the marketplace that may not be your traditional cannabis connoisseur. So I think they're doing some really good work out there. They're really clean. It's very simple. Houseplant, I got to say, Houseplant, I haven't had it, but all the stuff I've seen, it's a Seth Rogen brand. It's just
Yeah.
so out there. And I
Yeah.
love the name.
It's a good name. It's a really good name.
It's a great name.
Like, how did you come up with that?
It's a houseplant.
Right. Like it's just so obvious that it's one that I'm like,
I know.
Of course you called it that.
I know. But it's like, and so there's so many different brands out there, Kendra, and people gravitate towards stuff like Dosis that is informational, educational, and you know what you're going to get. Then there's like craft brands by people who have been in the industry for so long. But then there's celebrity brands that are doing great too. And there's nothing wrong with any one of them. It's just like you mentioned before, it's like, as a brand, pick who you want to go after and just own it, and
Yep.
and you'll be successful.
I'm going to end with that. I had another question for you, but that was a great answer.
Oh, okay.
So, Carlos, the last thing before we go, tell everyone where they can find you and where they can find more information about Cannecht.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So it's cannecht.com. CANNECHT. Cannecht, it's THC backwards. You can go on there and find out some information about the app, what we're all about. You can go to the upper right-hand corner and sign up for our app. We're in beta right now. We'd love to have you on board. It's a great experience. Give us your feedback. We have all sorts of cool ways that you can get in touch with us. Emails. We have a cool little messenger on the bottom right-hand corner that's you can contact us, and we'll get back to you.
And I think the key there is that it's free to sign up.
It's free to sign up.
It's free to sign up.
Yes.
So,
thank you.
All right.
About that.
I know you. No, absolutely. I'm here to help. I know you have an event to rush off to that's going to be pretty exciting, cool as you're launching Cannecht. Thank you so much for being here, Carlos. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Really stoked that we got to make it happen.
Absolutely. And to all of you watching, if you have any questions or comments for myself or Carlos, drop the link in the comments, drop your comments below and tag us, and we'll get back to you. And thank you and have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. You too. Thanks, Kendra.
Let's do this. Boom. There we go. This was fun.